I like being skeptical about things, most of all about skepticism itself, but I've been wondering lately, how does skepticism relate to human interaction? How can we understand the way we understand each other as human beings in the context of skepticism? And I thought of two examples in which we might recontextualize it. The first text I'll refer to is Thomas Nagel's What Is It Like to Be a Bat?, which concerns personal identity. And it argues that it is always a certain what it's like way to be a certain organism, in this case, a bat. So the text suggests that animals have subjective consciousness too. And the way I want to recontextualize it is that we, as human beings, will never truly understand each other because of this singular subjective consciousness every one of us has. If we look at it from this point of view, then we may actively doubt that we'll ever understand the other person because we'll never know what it feels like to be them. And if we assume this active doubt, this severe skepticism about human beings, then I think there are a few toxic beliefs this conviction might lead to. First of all, paranoia. Since we know we can never tell what's in the other person's head, we start to put words in our mouths. And if we keep doing that all the time, always trying to understand what the other person means, always strategizing and analyzing, overthinking, then we can become paranoid because we always see a double meaning in something the other person says to us. And that can lead to resentment. Because how can we trust the world if we can't even trust other human beings? And if we put words in their mouths, but it turns out we were wrong, then we can't even trust ourselves fully. And if we can't even trust ourselves, we begin to resent ourselves and our world, our reality. And that in turn leads to isolation. Isolation is not just a physical condition of being apart from the world. It is a psychological condition of being so closed off in every possible way that you cannot fully translate the world around you. It's as if you speak a different language to everyone and everything you come across. So I guess we've treaded a very risky path here. Am I claiming skepticism always leads to isolation? Not always, obviously. Even though I'm aware this is not what Thomas Nagel argued in his text, I tried to look at the subjective consciousness from a different perspective. And as I've been trying to find an alternative to this, something that will not challenge the belief that we will never understand each other, because that's obvious, but something that will make it less daunting, I thought of the debate on the joy of fish, which appears in Zhuangzi. I'm very sorry I'm pronouncing this wrong. An ancient Chinese text, which is named after the taoist philosopher Zhuangzi. So now I'll read you the story about the fish. Zhuangzi and Huixi were strolling along the bridge over the Hao River. Zhuangzi said, "The minnows swim about so freely, following the openings wherever they take them. Such is the happiness of fish." Huixi said, "You are not a fish, so whence do you know the happiness of fish?" Zhuangzi said, "You are not I, so whence do you know I don't know the happiness of fish?" Huixi said, "I am not you, to be sure, so I don't know what it is to be you. But by the same token, since you are certainly not a fish, my point about your inability to know the happiness of fish stands intact." And the story ends with Zhuangzi saying, "Let's go back to the starting point. You said, whence do you know the happiness of fish? Since your question was premised on you knowing that I know it, I must have known it from here, up above the Hao River." The figure of Huixi needs proof to be able to state they truly know something or someone, in this case, the fish, which means he's a skeptic when it comes to fully knowing another being, another animal or other human being. On the other hand, where I think Zhuangzi is in terms of skepticism in this context, is that he's skeptical about the definition of knowing itself. There are different ways of knowing something or someone. Sometimes not knowing is one of them. What Zhuangzi says is that every being has its own sense of rightness and wrongness, and it always stands in opposition to someone else's right and wrong, which means we always have to accept the other being's perspective. And by that, we reach a higher perspective ourselves. And then when we reach it, we're able to be in harmony with everyone else's point of view, even if we cannot fully understand it. We accept them not knowing, we trust it even. I think one of the traps of skepticism in this context may be that you become so skeptical about everything, so hesitant, that you feel the need to prove everything you say or do. If we enter this toxic skepticism space, you may become defensive and distrustful towards everything we or anyone else says But Zhuangzi feels no need whatsoever to defend his knowledge or the lack of it, because that happiness of fish, just like his own happiness, only depends on every being what it is. We might also call it, as Zhuangzi refers to this in his writings, the illumination of the obvious, where the lack of answers illuminates the ways in which we may interact with reality. A way where we surrender to the unknown. And the obvious is that which cannot be seen, something that is there for us to accept, that other person's perspective, that which we will never know. Does that still count as skepticism? I think it does, at least in the framework we're in this particular video. In my video about desire, I said that we can never let go of our desires, and that also goes for a desire to know the world and other people. But maybe this taoist skepticism, which is a term I'm using very casually, it's not binding or official at all, can subdue this desire, at least. And I genuinely think this kind of skepticism can help in empathy, because we always doubt our preconceptions of human beings. But at the same time, we accept the rightness of their point of view without desperately looking for answers or explanations. And that can also help with those 3 toxic beliefs I mentioned before. Paranoia, because we accept the point of view of another person as it is. We don't look into those double meanings or what's hidden between the lines. We don't seek out deception. Of course, that's completely different than being naive and believing every single thing another person says. But we don't always treat another person's point of view as somehow directed at or biased towards us. It's just what it is. It also helps with resentment, because we cannot resent other people for existing within their consciousness the way they do. Just like we cannot resent fish for swimming in the water and not interacting with us. We have no reason for resenting anyone or anything, because everything has its own rightness of being. And we're obviously less isolated. I don't mean that we start going out into the world more and interacting with other people, but that even if we still don't fully understand each other, even if we still speak a different language, we begin to listen to the world's tone, its melody. Maybe that's a cliche metaphor, but instead of listening to the lyrics and looking for the hidden symbolism within, we may adjust our own key so that the melody flows freely. To use another example of skepticism, in Baroan skepticism, the goal is to reach ataraxia, which is a state of serene calmness. Baroan skepticism is about suspending judgment. And if we look at it, again, purely from the perspective of human relationships, then it will obviously make us calmer, because we're not desperate to understand other people fully, and to have them understand us. Pyrrho was considered as remarkably calm due to his lack of opinion. And what does a lack of opinion mean in a human relationship? It means looking at them from a neutral standpoint, at least to an extent. We love forming opinions about other people, as well as opinions about how other people rightly or wrongly perceive us. But if you arrive at an interaction with a sense of neutrality, suspension of judgment, then it is more likely you'll reach ataraxia, and you won't feel this need to justify or defend anything. We'll accept that we'll never know what other people may think or feel, and then we'll use Zhuangzi's point about using this not knowing to our own advantage, to feel counterintuitively more connected to the world. Another way in which skepticism helps me is that each time when I have an excessive reaction to something or someone, I am always skeptical about my reaction. I never really trust it. In other terms, I don't have to trust myself or the world in order to be able to stop distrusting myself or the world. I probably don't know anything, but I'll say it anyway. I'll sing it out and hope it's the right key, even if the lyrics don't make sense. It's all about creating your own use for the tools you have to build a better life and a more pleasant mind. Let me know what you think about it in the comments, and if you intuitively trust that I know what I'm talking about, then consider liking the video, sharing, subscribing to my channel, sticking around, and thank you for your time.